This episode of the BarBari Chronicles is proudly brought to you by Bariatric Support Australia.
Hi everybody, I'm Tash
And I'm Damo.
and we are so excited to bring you this week's episode of the BarBari Chronicles. This week we are very privileged to have with us a wonderful dietitian from Dr. He's team in Melbourne. We have Julia with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah. So, Julia, can you tell us what sort of led you to become a dietitian?
And it sort of got close to the end of year 12 and I just feel like it wasn't really sitting right with me, but I always knew that I wanted to do something in healthcare. I really wanted to help people. I love food. I love cooking. I wanted something that I could do anywhere in the world, and it really just aligned so well with me. And then just from day one of my degree, it felt right and it never stopped feeling right. So here I am.
Amazing.
Love that.
Amazing. And what about bariatrics? Because we know that there's a big difference between a dietitian and someone who is a dietitian but experience with people going through, bariatric surgery.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting area to get into, and it's probably something that I did fall into. Like when I did start working for this particular business, I was actually starting off in sort of marketing and social media, and then took up more hours as a dietitian. At the time, I was working more in sort of eating disorders, so that actually did link in my interest a little bit with bariatrics, because there is sometimes obviously quite a large crossover between chronic dieting and people seeking surgery. So that did kind of actually match me quite well in that sense. But it is a big learning curve. It's a big, big area from the emotional side to the clinical side. It's all quite complex in comparison to a lot of other areas.
It is. It is. I sometimes wonder how what the thought process is behind ending up in a practice like you are now. When you were doing your degree, could you have ever imagined that you would be working in this field?
Honestly, no, because originally I did want to go into more public health, because it's in my head, more people the better, help as many as possible, but it's quite a hard area to get into. So a lot of us do go into private practice, but I'm lucky enough now that I do a split role. So I still get to see clients a couple of days of the week, but I also do our projects and marketing. So in that sense, I feel like I do get to really help a big broad range.
That's wonderful.
Communicate with a broad range of people. So it's like something I didn't expect, but I've kind of fit it in with what my original aspirations were. But it also helps just having a wonderful team. Like it's sort of one of those situations where I'm like, I don't want to leave my amazing team. Like they just put so much effort into, making it the best possible place for a patient to have their surgery experience. And if that wasn't there and my values weren't aligned with that, I probably wouldn't be here. But that just happens to be the case where, everyone is 1000% dedicated to, getting you guys the best outcomes possible.
Yeah.
I love that.
So where do you start with, if you see a client and they're struggling with that whole diet culture, which, honestly, most of us have done that. And where do you actually start with breaking that down for them, that this journey isn't really about a diet as such? Because there must be so much to unload there for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think that's where the challenge is that there is so much to unload that sometimes unloading it and going really hard to start off with is not the right solution. But the thing that I find the most successful, I think, is just starting off those conversations with the way that I communicate. So if I'm communicating in a way that says, balance is okay, flexibility is okay, there's nothing that I think that you need to exclude in the long term. Like I'm trying to utilize, I guess, my language to my clients to sort of say, this is in my experience and with my evidence base, this is what I believe to be the best way for you to achieve your goals. But I'm not going to be the one to sit here and tell you, like, you can't eat this, you can't eat that. This is not okay. You've got to be strict with yourself, because I couldn't do that myself, and I don't like asking things of people that I couldn't do myself. So I think that's just where it starts, is those really small sort of planting the seed of like, it's okay to expand your diet. Just because you're having surgery doesn't mean we need to completely overhaul everything, and no one expects you to be perfect. So I kind of try and implement that message early on, and where there is space and where there is like the client's capacity to make change or explore their relationship with food, then sometimes that often comes a little bit later, and for some people they're already in there wanting to explore it straight away. So yeah, it is very different person to person, but I guess I'm trying to lead by example in the way that I'm communicating with them is my priority.
Wow. Even that would, I guess, be such a challenge in that so much of that is almost mental health related as well. And so it's not just about being great with here's the eating plan. You actually have to understand how people are thinking when they're going through that.
Yeah, which is really hard. And I think the best part about that is that most people have everything they need within themselves to be able to make those changes, but they might just need a different type of support to facilitate that. So I guess from my side as a dietitian, like, yes, we're going to have some overlap in the mental health space, and I guess what we'd call nutrition counselling. But, it's that kind of dynamic of when do we need to refer on to psychology? Most of the time in those cases, luckily, someone's probably already involved. But, yeah, I guess it's just sort of about, finding a bit of a balance there.
So in the process, or when someone comes to you for that very first appointment, what can they expect in that very first appointment? Because we know from having been in bigger bodies ourselves, but also from speaking with so many people over the years, that it can be such a frightening thing to finally be decided, okay, well, I'm going down the route of this huge procedure. And there can sometimes be this mentality that I must get past the trolls that are under the bridge. I don't mean that you are in any way a troll, but you know what I mean. It's like we must
definitely.
We must tick off the dietetic box. We must tick off the psychology box, and then we will finally be allowed to have our procedure. But I know that is really not true at all, and it's such an important relationship to get established. But what can people expect when they walk through the doors and they come to see you?
Yeah, I'll definitely touch on the what to expect, but just to note as well that I guess like we're aware that, a lot of the time people are coming in with really, really complex pathways to get here to this point of surgery. And like we understand that like there's going to be a lot of apprehension. There's a lot of weight stigma and bias out there in the medical field. And I think it's very, very normal and to be feeling apprehensive and feeling like, oh God, I don't want to talk to this person about my food. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to have to repeat this story again. But I guess the things that I focus on personally in that first appointment, I guess just one, letting people know there is a lot of information. And it can be overwhelming sometimes. So we'll try and break it down as much as possible, but also just giving them the reassurance that we are going to be there every step of the way. We'll get everything out on the table so that you're as informed as possible, but it's not just here's this lump of information and there you go. This is the starting point. We're getting to know each other. We're figuring it out. But if there's things we need to figure out along the way, like that's what we're here for, and we will guide you through that process. So part of it's obviously the knowledge that comes with just learning about the surgery process, the reassurance of, what my role is in their kind of surgery journey, but also as well just getting to know what their journey has been up until that point and how that's shaped their relationship with food and their weight, and how they're feeling about the whole process.
That's excellent. I think one of the things, and Damo and I have discussed this a lot, that we both felt was just a deep sense of shame going into that first appointment with our respective dietitians. And I know from having spoken with so many wonderful dietitians that is the the very last thing that you're thinking is, oh wow, you're always thinking, how can we work together to get the desired health outcomes in this situation? That's the case, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of the time too, I always try and pop in a little note there in my appointments of just saying, like, there's nothing that I would expect you to be able to change overnight. Like, outside of the necessary medical things that we might have to do early post-op, you know, I don't expect you to be going from having a lot of challenges with food, whether it's, you know, even down to things like binge eating or whatever it might be. Like, that doesn't necessarily just go away when we have surgery. So I don't expect you to put that pressure on yourself to be able to just do everything 100%. And so, yeah, it's definitely nothing to feel shameful of. And when we are doing things like diet histories and like talking through, you know, what your diet looks like at the time, most of the time that's really just to get an idea of like what the person likes, like what their schedule's like, what kind of barriers might be sitting in the way. It's never to sit there and go, you know, this person is eating X, Y, Z, not good or good. It's just, you know, we're just getting an understanding of how we can help you better, and how we can work with you rather than telling you advice that isn't relevant to your situation.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's excellent for our listeners to understand why dietitians ask the questions that they ask, so that we're able to break down the fear of going to these appointments. And I find it helpful, and I know others will find it really helpful to understand why certain questions are asked. And I think it's perfect to know that a lot of those questions probably come back to understanding barriers that might present themselves down the track. Like if there's a tendency to not eat until later in the day, or if there's a really heavy work schedule that meals are going to need to be incorporated into, and things like that. I'm sure, I'm 100% sure that those are the reasons for questions.
Yeah, and even just down to like that sort of that initial conversation and preparing for pre-surgery, like I don't want to sit there and tell you like, oh, you can make this, you can make that, you can make this, if you're like, you know what, I don't cook, I need everything purchased from the supermarket. Then it's sort of, you know, like then my conversation becomes like irrelevant and my advice isn't helpful for you. So it's just helpful for me to know if it's like, well, all I can do is take away, great, like we'll figure it out, we'll figure some convenient options for you rather than making you feel like I've suddenly need to become like the best cook in the kitchen to be able to get through the process. Yeah.
That's perfect. It's absolutely great to know.
I think for me, growing up, I always struggled with textures and smells.
Yeah.
And Tash, we've got sort of really funny stories of me gagging at different things. And even today, peas are one of those things that, you know, if I'm out at someone's house, I can at least be polite enough to swallow most of them. But even eating fried rice, if I'm at home, all the rice will be gone. There'll be this nice little pile of peas still sitting on my plate. And our daughter's the same with all that sort of stuff. We have had people on BSA that have said to us about, you know, they might have ADHD or different sensory processing issues, and they're really worried about how they're going to cope, you know, perhaps on the puree stage, or, you know, where they suddenly happening to eat foods that aren't really that familiar to them. And so where would you start with someone who's sort of coming from that point of view?
Yeah, and I guess it's like if we're looking specifically at things like the different sort of textures that we go through in the first few weeks, sometimes it is just a matter of figuring out like what are those safe foods, what are those safe textures that do feel comfortable and familiar, and how can we work the nutrition into that. Like as much as we do want to get nutrition in, we've also got to remember that those stages is probably only the first 2 weeks of your surgery journey.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not going to be the worst thing in the world if we do modify it a little bit. You know, sometimes I guess in our puree recommendations, we say, yeah, absolutely, you can puree like meats with a bit of sauce. Texturally, that can be a nightmare, but it's also like we can just do a thick soup and maybe add a bit of tasteless protein if we can't taste it. You know, we can have those little modifications. It's sometimes easier as well if you even just freeze things into ice cubes. You don't have to smell it, but you just, once it's sort of reheated, it's all done. But yeah, I would say majority of the time for me, it's really just what are the safe foods? What are the textures that we're comfortable with? How can we kind of meet in the middle and still make sure that you're feeling well and recovering well without having that psychological challenge of, you know, this is really like grating, because that is what it feels like sometimes. Is like to have to eat that food, it's going against something that feels like intrinsically wrong at the time. So yeah, it's a very tricky one, and it can be very individualized in that sense.
It's I found puree not really too challenging, but pureeing of meat and things like that was yucky. And I think probably quite a lot of people do struggle with that particular thing. And back then, there weren't really quite the same amount of options for the tasteless supplements or flavourless supplements that there are now. And even realistically thinking about it, I probably might have struggled with those in the early days. I know my team recommended using the shakes in that, like the OptiFast, and I struggled with them post-operatively. And I know that I'm not alone in that. What are some recommendations for people who might be finding, you know, even the liquid stage challenging? Is it just a case of really staying hydrated, or what do you say to your patients?
Yeah, I usually just say like there's generally 3 priorities. One is just making sure we've got a thin enough texture and everything's kind of nice and smooth. The second one being hydration, and the third one being protein. So if we're ticking those off, like you're doing fantastic. And again, you know, it's only going to be a week though on that liquid diet. Again, yes, I'm usually trying to optimize protein, but if you've got, you know, something in the day that's more just focused on hydration and we're a little bit under on protein, but we're still just getting our way through, you know, sometimes we've just got to say to ourselves, like, that's good enough for now. I'm getting through. I'm feeling okay. You know, my team's going to tell me if they're concerned about anything that I'm doing, or at least they should be. Yeah, at the end of the day, just kind of trying to find things that work and switching it up, especially with the flavors. So, you know, going for the more savory stuff, the blended soups, even if it's easier, just doing like a bit of stock in some water, adding the protein to that, or your bone broths, which already have protein in it, but are nice and thin. But yeah, I'll be the same with the shakes. I get the taste fatigue very quickly. I'm like, I have one and I just go, yeah, it's very hard to keep going. So I think variety is important, and also just mixing things in, you know. Some people add coffee to their shake, some people add some fruit in, just trying to change up the flavors, the temperature, the, you know, sweet versus savory. I feel like all of those can kind of help make it a little bit more exciting and, you know, have that element of novelty rather than feeling like it's just a week of, you know, shake after shake.
A week of remorse.
This is my punishment.
Yeah. That's actually how I felt when I was on that stage. I felt really punished. So yeah. Can we talk about what it means to listen to our body? What it means to listen in practical terms when dietitians talk to us about listening to our body, listen for your full cues, listen for those things. What does that actually mean for somebody that doesn't know how to do that?
Yeah. Well, it's challenging, especially if we don't know how to do that before we've had surgery, because that's usually where it's a little bit easier to figure out what that physical sensation does look like. But if I'm sort of like pulling back on the idea a little bit, a lot of the time when we have been sort of chronic dieting, we're not very in tune with those cues to begin with. A lot of the time our body is not giving us very clear signals for hunger or for fullness, or sometimes it's very heightened hunger. So they can be quite distorted for a lot of people who have been chronic dieting. But then when you have surgery, we're actually disrupting that process again in a way where for some people you might still get some normal levels of hunger, as in like, you know, you get a bit of hunger, you eat, you feel full. But for other people, they might not feel hungry at all, and that can be as equally confusing. So I guess I like to explain that process as well, of that, like, you know, the saying of like, listen to your body. Sometimes you might not have that cue there to even listen to as explicitly as you probably would have pre-surgery. So it's balancing like listening to the cues and noticing the cues that are happening, which definitely run through. But also on the flip side of that, it's going, all right, well, there's going to be days where I might not have those cues. What is my plan here? We actually still need the nutrition, even if I don't feel any hunger across the entire day. So it's balancing a little bit of like what's logical with also what I'm feeling inside. But I guess when we're talking about like hunger cues, it can be the normal hunger pangs. For someone post-surgery, it might be other signals like, you know, we're feeling like really flat, we're starting to get a little bit like lightheaded or shaky. But there are a lot of crossovers with different symptoms. So that's where a lot of people do find challenges.
Yeah, it can be very, very tricky. I know for me, I don't know, in my pre-operative life, I don't think I really ever felt truly hungry because I ate so much that I don't think I ever really actually felt hunger, which might sound very odd. So for me, I was one of those people that didn't really know how hunger actually felt.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel anything for at least the first 18 months after my surgery. So people would say, listen to your body. Hello.
It's like there's no audio coming back.
It's silent. Well, it's not silent. I mean, it sings like beautifully after I drink.
But now we get all the belly noises and
the gurgling and all of that.
We're talking to whales or something.
But so I was one of those people that just didn't know or understand what a full cue was or what a hunger cue was. So for me, eventually, I just started eating at regular times because I couldn't work out what it actually was. So I thought, well, probably not eating is not good, so I need to actually eat regularly.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy, and that's something I would usually recommend anyway. Like if we're at that point, we've got zero hunger cues, like we've still got to acknowledge our body's going to need something. I think that the statement of like only eat when you're hungry is just a little bit too, it lacks a lot of the nuance of, you know, we still need to actually get something in. But I always just say, if no hunger cues, eat regularly. Start with your 3 meals a day. If it feels, you know, too much to the point where it is a bit uncomfortable, then maybe we need to make some adjustments. But that's a great place to start.
Yeah, okay. That's a good little tip then.
That's great. And I think it's important because after weight loss surgery, we can not necessarily feel hungry, but we still need to be eating and getting that nutrition in. And, you know, I've heard people say, whoever said, if you're not hungry, don't eat. And I think, well, if that was me, especially, you know, I'm nearly 11 years post-op, if that was me 10 years ago, then I could literally, and I did a couple of times, go for 2 days without eating because I just wasn't hungry. And, you know, that can be really dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. And even just from like a fluid standpoint too.
I think that's really important that, you know, we do realise that we have to eat regularly.
So what are some of the most common challenges that people face when they're trying to work on their relationship with food?
I would say the number one thing that tends to get people feeling stuck is the element of black and white thinking, which I think a lot of us have, including myself sometimes.
Yeah.
But when I say that, I mean we're either doing it 100% or we're not doing it at all, and it's really hard to find that middle ground. When it comes to diet, when it comes to exercise, when it comes to any habits that we're trying to implement for our health, that's where I'd say people tend to get the most stuck.
Yeah. And how can we How come, I mean, obviously black and white thinking can be at play for all sorts of reasons, but what are the best ways to help ourselves when we are stuck in that type of a cycle?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it can be a hard one to get past in terms of a mindset, because a lot of the time that's something that does form over a long period of time, and it can be quite a complex thing to unravel, which, you know, in that case as well, psychology support is
Yep.
fantastic. But the way that I like to, I guess, approach that is typically, it's just basically what I call a little bit of like a hierarchy of what we can do based on our current capacity. And by that, I mean, if my client is aiming for, you know, perfectly proportioned meal that they've home cooked, and that's their view of quote unquote success after surgery in terms of their diet, we'll go, okay, well, if you had all the time in the world and we had all the money in the world and we could do all of that, we had all the energy, great, let's do that. But if we don't, which is often the case, like,
Yep.
let's actually practically think, what is one step down from that? And maybe it's, I'm preparing the meal, the proportions might not be perfect, that's okay. Step down from that might be, I've got some pre-made ingredients that I can quickly throw together, but it doesn't take a lot of prep. Step down from that, ready meals. Step down from that, let's say I'm at my absolute bottom, I don't have any capacity time-wise, emotionally, physically. My only option right now is takeaway. Great, let's find some options that might be better for
Yep.
you. So I think it's
I
just
love that.
reevaluating, like, what is my capacity? And sometimes my best, my 100%, is based off my capacity for the day. My 100% isn't the gold standard top of the hierarchy of like what I see as being, you know, the perfect meal or the perfect diet. It's what do I have the energy, time, capacity, motivation for today? And that tends to help my clients be able to go, all right, well, there's just like one little thing I can change, or like, oh God, I don't have time to cook. I guess I'll just get a ready meal because that's my level down. But I actually have planned for that level. So I know what I'm going to buy. I know what's going to feel good. I know what's going to keep me feeling satisfied. So constantly trying to evaluate where you're sitting.
I love
that. That is awesome.
Yeah,
That's
I really,
great advice.
really love that. It's a practical way for people to treat themselves with kindness.
Yeah, definitely.
And it sort of gives us a metric or a way to measure. Okay, so this is how I'm feeling today. I could not possibly do the ultimate, but maybe I'm around here and I will treat myself kindly. We'll do that. We're going to feel good about it. And this is 100% today.
Yeah, totally. And it is
I
about
like
that
that.
compassion component. It's like, okay, well, I've actually planned for this. I'm on my different level today, but that's okay. I'm actually expecting that. I've planned for that. It's within my pathway of, quote, again, like, quote, success after surgery. It's not something that I have to feel bad about. It's not something that means I've failed because I'm not at my top level. It's just, you know, this is my alternative, and today that's good enough, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love it.
That's great. I was at Coles a couple of weeks ago, and they had these frozen meals that were on special, and you know they'd been marked down to like $1 each. And I got some, and I just went, you know what? For times where I just can't be bothered, I'm just going to have one of these, and you know, stuck them in the freezer, and it works. I know it mightn't be the most nutritional thing, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we do have Christmas coming up in very, very soon. For those people that are going through surgery and everything around this time, what are some top tips, or for those people that are experiencing Christmas or you know, like all the holiday gatherings, etc., end of year things at this particular time of year? What are some tips for, you know, if you've not experienced this time as a weight loss surgery person before?
No, well, very timely question, because we just we run monthly online support groups, and we just had one this week around this particular topic. But the thing that I like to tackle it in a couple of ways, and one is a long-term strategy and one is a short-term strategy. And the long-term strategy is this surgery journey is for the rest of your life. And that can be a
100%.
scary thing to say out loud, but if we have things that we are forbidding ourselves from happening for 11 months of the year, and then all of a sudden they're all in front of us on a big smorgasbord, the natural response is, oh my God, I want to try everything, and it's probably going to be really hard to stop. So as hard as it can feel and as counterintuitive as it can feel, I always encourage a little bit more flexibility in terms of, like, if there's things that you really love to eat, if there's favorite foods that only seem to come around on Christmas, actually explore having those during the year. Don't have it be something that's like a restricted item that, you know, is suddenly in abundance and feeling overwhelming on, you know, a few weeks of the year. Because in that situation, we're kind of setting ourselves up to fail. Flexibility with what you're eating during the whole time, but also when we get to sort of Christmas, there's a lot of different things happening, a lot of events. You might not always have control over what's going to be available, but as we're sort of talking about before, listening to your body, we love that phrase, but just checking in with yourself. If we can't control what's there, then control how it's sitting, how it's feeling. Have I had enough? Are there other things that I can do if I'm feeling pulled into eating, but I'm actually overfull and uncomfortable? Can I make it more about, all right, have I asked, you know, my auntie about her recent holiday, or just distracting yourself from that a little bit on the day so that you're not, I guess, one, getting pulled into it, but also just taking those moments to check in with yourself. How are my fullness levels? Do I feel satisfied? Have I picked out some of the really nice things that I enjoy and love? And have I just savored them and really liked that experience? But at the end of the day, if, you know, you have a bit of whatever it is, like, you know, Christmas trifle or whatever, it's one day. It's not going to break the bank. Just focus on what your next steps are. Like, once the day is done, what's my next meal look like? Great, we move forward. The more we mull over it and the more that we shame ourselves for the way we eat on a single day, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah, totally agree. I remember my very first post-bariatric Christmas. I'd already decided that I was having pavlova. It was a horrifying thing that I experienced after that. I wish that I'd tried it prior. You know, I wish that I'd knew what was going to happen to me prior to that experience. And also, I guess, just something that I have found that really does work for me is exactly what you said, that the longer term mindset of knowing that all of the foods are available all of the year around. Yeah. And I actually keep chocolate on hand for that reason, because that way I know that I'm not restricting myself. I can have some if I want. It was actually funny. In this podcast room, I kept a bowl of chocolate from Easter on the table for ages and ages, and I just never ate it. But there was a time when I would have smashed the whole lot in one sitting, because I had a very different mindset back then. It was very much a reward thing. So it was very much a different relationship, I guess, with food, or with those sorts of foods back then. Now it's just, well, it's food, and if I want to have some, then I will, and if I don't, then I won't.
Yeah, I think that's a great mindset to be in. You know,
but it took a long time.
Yeah, definitely. But it's hard when that internal monologue is like, oh, well, I can have this thing, but only under a very specific set of circumstances, and only if I've, you know, earned it in some way, which is such a harsh dynamic to be yo-yoing between mentally.
Oh, gosh, remember when we were doing Weight Watchers and we had to...
Damo and I were at Weight Watchers by the time he was 8 and I was 10.
Really?
So we were actually at Weight Watchers as very, very young children, as recommended by our doctor. And you had to earn your treats. It was very much like an earn it. You had to restrict other things to earn the right to have whatever it was. And it took so long for me to break out of that. I consider that to be a very toxic diet culture sort of a mentality, and just realize that food doesn't have morals. It's just food.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's how I use the food that will determine, whatever. It's not that food is a bad food, but that's very much how we grew up, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Especially
And
at 8, 10 years old, yeah.
it was almost like you were one of the pets, you'd get thrown out if you were good. And I think that it set us up for, so many years of feeling like we had to earn anything nice. And, I grew up with my idea of eating healthy was a plate of salad with some tuna sprinkled over it. And that was it. If you weren't eating that, then you weren't eating healthy. And it's so different, and it takes so much time to unlearn that. It's not the surgery certainly doesn't fix the years of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the years of tying your intrinsic value as a person to whether a food is good or bad or not. And if you've had that, does that make you a bad person? Like, that's often the dynamic that I hear on the other end, is just that becomes the belief of like, if I'm doing this, then I'm good, and if I'm not doing it, then I'm bad. And that's who I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's tied into something that I have to do every single day because I've got to eat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what about your favourite recipes? Your favourite things to make? Things that you love?
Well, probably why I'm, good at finding different levels for my clients is that I'm usually on the lower capacity level at the moment. I absolutely love cooking. I love doing anything baking related. I love my Italian food. But honestly, at the moment, like, my partner and I, like, we're both working full time. We both do extracurricular stuff.
So favorite takeout then?
Oh, favorite takeout, Vietnamese. Easy done.
Vietnamese. Yum.
Yeah.
Favorite dish?
I like doing a little, like, one of the barbecue pork soups, like the little sort of wonton soup style. That would be my go-to. But I do love a good Guzman and Gomez as well. They're really delicious.
GOG.
Yep, I love that. And it's relatable and practical, because you know what, like, we do not all, and I know that people listening will relate to this. We do not all have time every day to be standing in the kitchen for an hour and a half cooking dinner.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes dinner is just like, all right, well, chicken from Woolworths, bag of salad pre-mix, wrap.
Bag of salad,
like,
wrap. We have dinners like that quite often in this house.
Yeah.
There's a lot of children still at home, and people come and go, and we just say, the food is in the fridge. Make what you want of it, because I'm not standing around cooking for 3 hours.
I think one of our family favourites, and we did it the other night. It was our dad's birthday, and it was just burrito bowls, and there were some wraps there if anyone wanted it. Just help yourself. It's all there, and away you go. And they're some of my favourite meals, because we get to spend more time with the family than worrying about what's on the stove or what's in the oven. And
Totally. And sometimes it's just like, I think we do get caught up as well in terms of like the health messaging too of different things, but it's like there's absolutely nothing wrong with like pre-chopped frozen veg that you can just throw in a stir fry. Like, I'll often do that, just that with a bit of tofu or beef strips or whatever it might be, and a quick easy soy saucey base, but it doesn't need to be complicated to still be nourishing and healthy and balanced.
Yeah.
Agreed. How great is tofu when you because my husband and I have it probably at least once a week, because it's so quick. Just chop it up, put it in the pan, and then it's ready like 2 minutes later with some salad. Perfect.
It's so good. Sometimes it takes some convincing to get some people to try it, but I think it's so versatile. It's also cheap. I mean, everything's too expensive these days anyway. I love doing meals that are
I know.
Like tofu, beans, chickpeas, that sort of stuff. It just gives you good variety, but also it doesn't sit so heavy for you guys post-op.
I totally agree with you. I think the one at Coles is like $2.35 for a little block.
Yeah.
It's just, Yeah, it's a great.
I think the last time I had tofu, I was trying to impress my date, and
Were they
It worked.
I
impressed?
just went, this is so not worth it.
You probably need to try it a different way. So the fact that you do work with like the marketing side of things and obviously with social media and things like that. What are your thoughts on how weight stigma and body image is being still portrayed in the media? Do you think it's getting any better? I personally think that we still have a long, long way to go?
Yeah, I think that would be too simple to say it's getting better. I actually think it's just getting sneakier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the messaging can be harmful, even in the wellness space, especially. It's like, do more. You're not doing enough to make sure that you're healthy. You need to buy all these things. But the message undercurrent is always you're not doing enough, rather than exploring the systems and the culture that underpins weight stigma and diet culture itself. I think we're still very individual focused, it can be really harmful, to say you need to do all of this work to make your life better when you've got all of these other systems that are working against you, in a broader space. And you've also got all this marketing telling you, whatever you achieve, there's more that you haven't, and you need to keep working to get there, even if it's not something that's actually achievable.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I don't know, what have you guys found? Do you find that, you've said that you feel like there's quite a lot of work to go. I guess, yeah, what have you noticed in particular?
It's because success or goal or whatever that might be, I think whatever it has some sort of an image attached to it, there's always going to be the potential for people to be exploited.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, health, wellness, knowing that I'm going to be able to still be walking around when I'm like 80 years old, those things are what drive me, and they're the things that I value. But when I see people that are obviously wanting to look like an image, I know that I'll never be able to achieve that. But I guess there was a letting go for me of what I hoped I might get to in my head versus what I can actually achieve in reality. And I'm perfectly fine with that now, but I know that it really can impact other people, and it makes me so sad. Yeah. And it breaks my heart.
Absolutely. And sometimes as well, it does come back to that compassion element again, where it's about saying, like, it makes sense that I want this, given the messaging I've had my entire life, given what I'm bombarded with every day. Why would I not feel this way? Why would I not want to fit into that certain image? But we almost feel like guilty for wanting to do it at the same time as, it's like we try and like resist it, but also we're going with it, and then we feel guilty either way. So giving compassion for that person that craves, the respect and the care that they deserved at any body size that they probably didn't get.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because Damo and I've talked about this quite a lot, how it can just feel nearly like you're betraying, or I felt like I was betraying sort of my family, because a lot of people in my family have bigger bodies. So that was so hard for me to come to grips with the fact that I was going to go down a surgical route and have this surgery, and then I was going away from that. I wanted to be well and healthy, but there was a part of me that also did want to look a certain way.
Yeah.
But then during that process, I definitely I just knew that I was never going to achieve perfect beauty standards. And so I have become so passionate about standing up for and saying no to that whole thing, and being comfortable and okay in our own skin. And I have a lot of skin. And I will never be able to have a lot of it dealt with. I've had the front of me, like I had my tummy skin done because I had so much of it, and it was infection risk. It was breaking down all the time. And I did have my arms done as well, and my boobs, because they sat on my knee. So, you know, we had those fixed, but the back of me still is all wrinkles, and it won't ever be fixed because of the bleeding risk. And I'm perfectly fine with it now. I'm okay with how my body is now, but it took a long time. And I get quite a lot of comments like, "Ew, you're gross, you look like a Shar-Pei, yuck, you should get that dealt with, blah, blah." Damo's just had shaming, body shaming in the last 24 hours, haven't you, Damo?
Yeah.
What happened?
I put a post up on Instagram, just a before and after, you know, and I had one message that was, "You think you've achieved something, but you had surgery, you haven't achieved anything," you know, and people get really nasty with that sort of stuff, or this isn't the same person, you've stolen someone else's picture, and you just sit there going, what the fuck, you know, like there's no need for it. And I think in some ways they're actually worse on social media than it has ever been, because there are so many people, and I guess it's the media and that, but you know, we have celebrities that you know, they lose a whole heap of weight, but you know, they're never willing to actually say how they did it.
Yeah.
And I think that's damaging as well, because, you know, when people use it was diet and exercise, it sort of puts a stigma on anyone else that if you bothered to actually get off your ass and stop eating takeaway, then, you know, you'd be healthier. You've
had that, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so I guess our experience, even though like we're in the social media space a lot, is still that is a very, very stigma driven place.
Absolutely. And first off, I'm sorry, because that's a horrible thing to have thrown at you. But I guess sometimes the way that I like to look at it as well is there's obviously some real hurt going on in those people, and there's something that
Agreed.
Feeling insecure about themselves, and they see you being brave, and they see you being your authentic self, and potentially feel threatened by that in some way. And I guess it's just that, almost like that motivation to go, like, you know, my goal now is to show up as my authentic self and be courageous in that where I can. And obviously it's not easier said than done, but you know, that's an act of rebelling against that, is just being you and showing up in the way that feels authentic to you.
And I think showing up, I think knowing that there is an incredible bariatric community out there, knowing that there's incredible allied health, that there's specialists, that there's surgeons, that there is so much scientific evidence to back all of the things that we're doing and that we're saying. I think that has solidified something on the inside of me that just says, yeah, I really don't care about the fact that you can't see my worth at this time. I know what my worth is, and I understand what my value is, regardless.
Yeah. That's almost like hard for some people to hear, because maybe, like, you know, that's something that's extremely powerful, and it's like, okay, well, you know, I can't put this person down anymore, so I don't know what to do with myself.
It can, I guess it can be quite a confronting thing, but I think that's why it's important to stand up. That's why it's important to be strong and to stand there on social media and say, well, here I am, not perfect, saggy, baggy, and all of the above, but still here because there's hope.
Yeah, exactly. And knowing in yourself, as you've said, like, there is research to back this up. It is,
that's
like,
right.
You know how much work you're putting in. And sometimes it's hard for that to be enough, but it's about working towards you being okay with that. You knowing in yourself that you're happy with how you're living your life, rather than, you know, does the other person see the work that I've put in? And if they don't, then what a shame that they've missed out on experiencing that journey that you've had.
Yeah,
that's exactly
right. Julia, thank you so much for joining us.
That's okay.
We've had a great time.
Yeah, we have. Thank you. It's an awesome chat.
Time, guys.
yeah, we'd love to do this again next year with you.
It'd be great.
Definitely, I'd be more than happy to. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's definitely been lovely speaking with you both. And yeah, thank you for sharing as well. I feel like it's really just nice to hear a bit more about your journeys in this way.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sure it will be very relevant to a lot of people listening.